Aloha and welcome to our 2020 Leadership Series. My name is Deidre Teagarden and I'm the Executive Director here at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, where our mission is to encourage people and inspire people to find the hero within themselves through the legacy of our Nisei veterans. We are so honored today to have with us Mr. Paul Yonamine of Central Pacific Bank, who is actually launching our new Take Leadership Series. Take, of course, means bamboo in Japanese, and it's known for its strength and resiliency during stormy times, something which I think we can all relate to right now as we are going through COVID. We have a wonderful audience joining us today from across the state, the US mainland, and also Japan. So to our Japanese friends, I'd like to say, 本日はお忙しい中ご参加くださり誠にありがとうございます。Before I introduce Mr. Yonamine, I just want to go through a few quick housekeeping items. Number one, this is being recorded. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel for future viewing. Number two, we can't see or hear you. So please know that your privacy is being protected. And finally, we want to make sure that we have time for question and answer after Mr. Yonamine's talk. But we received so many questions ahead of time. We will be focusing on getting those questions answered during our Q&A session instead of taking new ones. All right. Well, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Paul Yonamine. He is the chairman and CEO of Central Pacific Financial Corp, the parent company of Central Pacific Bank, at which he serves as its executive chairman. Prior to joining Central Pacific Financial Corp, Mr. Yonamine was executive chairman of GCA Corporation Japan, the largest independent M&A advisory investment bank listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. They specialized in technology-based cross-border M&A advisory services with 18 offices across 10 countries. Mr. Yonamine served as president and country general manager of IBM Japan Limited until March 2017. IBM Japan was one of the best performing divisions of IBM with approximately 9 billion in annual revenues and was recognized by Nikkei, Japan's leading business journal, as a leader in workforce diversity. Previously, Mr. Yonamine served as president and CEO of Hitachi Consulting Company Limited from 2006 to 2010, where he founded the first consulting and solutions business for Hitachi Limited. From 2004 to 2006, he was a senior advisor to the mayor of the city and county of Honolulu, where he led a private-public partnership initiative to re-engineer city government operations. He also served as executive vice president and chairman of Bearing Point Asia Pacific, president of KPMG Consulting in Japan, and managing partner of the Hawaii operations of KPMG LLC. He also serves on the board of directors of Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation of Japan, one of the largest financial institutions in the world. He is chair-elect of the board of directors of the U.S.-Japan Council, having served as its chair of the board of counselors for 10 years. And he's also on the board of directors for the Pacific International Center for High Technology Research. He is the co-chair of the Economy Committee of the Hawaii Executive Collaboratives Change Initiative and a member of Young Presidents Organization and Move Oahu Forward. He is a graduate of the University of San Francisco and holds a CPA designation. And in spite of everything that he has going on, he's a very busy man, he has some time for us today. So let's give him a very warm virtual Maui welcome. Mr. Yonamine, I turn it over to you. Thanks for being here today.
Great. Thank you, Deidre. And I should have given you the short biography, but in any event, thank you very much, Deidre, for inviting me to give a talk to everyone today. And also Seidin Ota, who's in Maui and part of the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center. And Sadine is on the board of Central Pacific Bank. So when she asked me, of course, I can't say no to a board member. But it really is an honor for me to have this opportunity. Now, I just heard moments ago that we have people from Japan on this call as well. And so, I'd like to definitely pass on my greetings to them. 皆様ポール・ヨナミネでございます。本当に今日は日本からのご参加ということで、ありがとうございます。今日はですね、ですけど英語で、いろいろちょっとお話をさせていただきますので、どうぞ一つよろしくお願いします。And again, a real pleasure. And the topic that Deidre asked me to talk about today was about the new normal through the lens of Nisei values. And, as the CEO of Central Pacific Financial Corp, which is the parent company of Central Pacific Bank, I have to tell you that the new normal, the pandemic, this crisis is really a top of mind issue for me. It's what keeps me up at night. And, from February, when we really started to encounter this crisis in Hawaii, I have to tell you that I had to gather up all the courage and the resolve I can. And, we have 1,000 employees. We have tens of thousands of customers. And, many people rely on this organization. So it was very important for me to really take a hard look at my inner self, what I need to do, how I need to navigate the organization, how to help the community. And in looking deeply into myself, and it's very interesting, with this opportunity to talk to all of you about Nisei values. I did a lot of thinking about this for the last couple of weeks, since being asked to talk to you. And I have to admit that I think of a lot of values or the learnings and the lessons and the experiences that I've gained from my father, from my grandfather as well. Not to mention many other senpais and mentors over the years. And so today I'd really like to talk about them first. And hopefully that will give you a sense of the type of values that I picked up over the years. Let me start off with my slides. And the first slide I would like to share with you. This is a photo that I took several years ago at Mayor Hamada's office. Mayor Hamada is the mayor of Nakagusuku in Okinawa. And this is where my grandfather was born and raised. I called him up because when I was at IBM, actually IBM Japan is the second largest employer in Okinawa. And so I called the mayor and I said, my grandfather is from your village. I'd like to visit you. And so I went to his office. He was waiting there for me with three of my relatives, the people sitting to my right and to the left, and the individual right behind me. I'd never met them before, but it was so nice. He actually found three relatives of mine. And then he produced my grandfather's birth certificate. And he said, this is the oldest document that we have in Nakagusuku. And I have to tell you, it gave me a lot of chicken skin, as we say in Hawaii. It was really quite an experience for me. And I thought deeply at that moment and also that evening, the days to follow, about how my grandfather left Okinawa for a better life to Maui in Hawaii. He was 16 years old, and his parents, my great-grandparents, thought that he should move to Hawaii to make a better living because there was so much poverty, and it was very, people were very poor in Okinawa in those days. But I think about it and I think, how does a 16-year-old by himself go on a ship from Naha to Yokohama to Honolulu and then to Maui? It had to take tremendous courage to do something like that, and this vision for a better life. And so so then my grandfather arrived in Maui, and back in those days, there were many Japanese who were working, especially in the sugar field. And that's exactly what he did. You know, when I visited him, when I visited the mayor in Nakagusku, there was sugarcane all over City Hall. And so he ended up in a city, or a little village, I should say, called Olowalu in Maui. It's very close to Lahaina. And at the age of 16, he just jumped right in. He started working really hard. And it was really hard labor from what he told me. Sometimes he would work 15, 16 hours a day. But they would get paid really well, a lot more than they got paid in Okinawa. You know, it's interesting, and maybe some of you may not know, but at the time there was a lot of immigration from Japan. You know, right up to World War II, to the 40s, the actual percentage of Japanese Americans in Hawaii was close to 50%. If you can, if you could believe that. So a very big group of Japanese that eventually immigrated to Hawaii. And, and all those individuals who left Japan for a better life to Hawaii, it had to take a lot of courage, to go trans-Pacific all the way to Hawaii. They had to have this vision for a better life for themselves, for their family. And so my father was born in Olowalu. He was one of 7 children. And my father, from a very early age, apparently worked in the sugarcane field. He would carry a lot of the cane and carry it over to the factory, the mill, and he used to always tell me that that was one of the reasons why he eventually became a very good athlete. He was very good in sports, and his sport of choice was football. And so he played for the Lahaina Luna school in Maui, and then soon through one of his uncles. He was invited to play for Farrington High School in Honolulu, and moved to Farrington and did a fantastic job playing for the Farrington football team. Apparently he still has some records that haven't been broken in Farrington. And so upon graduation from high school, he was drafted. And unfortunately, it wasn't the pro draft, it was the US Army draft. And by the way, this is the only photo I have of him when he was with the US Army. He joined the Army in 1945, and he was in training. And he was very fortunate that the war ended, so he didn't have to go to combat. But there were a couple experiences that he went through in the Army. One was that they had him playing football all the time for the US Army team, and actually traveled quite a bit on the mainland for that. And this is a scene where he apparently got a commendation of sorts for some of his football playing. But the other was, like all Japanese Americans, they were impressed and they had tremendous respect for what a lot of the Nisei veterans did in Europe during the war. And he had a tremendous respect for the 442nd soldiers and the heroics that they had in Europe as well. He eventually was honorably discharged from the Army, started playing semi-pro football in Honolulu when he was invited, and he received an offer to play for the San Francisco 49ers. And so he was the first Japanese American to play for the San Francisco 49ers as a halfback. And this was back in 1947, 2 years after after World War II. I just couldn't imagine being a Japanese American playing in San Francisco as a halfback, for the National Football League. And clearly it wasn't a very friendly environment. There were many people who weren't that friendly to Japanese Americans yet. And that's understandable. World War II was a very difficult process. My father did extremely well, though. And, he played there for 1 year, had some pretty good stats, and won a lot of fans. He went there naturally because he needed the money. His family was not that well off. But as he played there, he came in touch with many Japanese Americans who lived in the Bay Area, and they were so proud of him. They couldn't believe that another fellow Japanese American, could play amongst all of the other football players, for the 49ers. And then he started feeling more of a, this responsibility of sorts, of being this hope and inspiration to the Japanese American community in the Bay Area. After playing there for one season, unfortunately, in the off season, he played in Hawaii during the off season and got injured. And when he went back, to report for training, they released him. They fired him, and that's how it worked back in those days. So a couple months later, after he fixed his arm, he started playing baseball, and which is pretty amazing to go from football into baseball right away. But and he found out that he was a pretty good baseball player as well, and played for a team in Honolulu called the Asahis, and had some very good statistics there. And he was invited then, he had an offer from the San Francisco Seals again, and he had this opportunity to go back to the Bay Area to continue, providing more inspiration to people, in the Bay Area as well. So he joined the San Francisco Seals. The manager at the time was an individual called Lefty O'Doul, who before the war actually brought Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig to Japan. Lefty O'Doul really liked my father, and but he thought, my father needed to brush up his game a bit, farmed him out to the Salt Lake City Bees, right in Utah. And again, Japanese American, in 1949, 1950, playing professional baseball in areas like Utah. He had to go to Wyoming, he had to go to Montana. And, some of the villages he went, or the towns he went, they'd never seen an Asian. And so, he used to tell me that, sometimes he had a great experience, sometimes it was a very negative experience, but he worked through that and did very well. Now, this is an interesting story. After the war, Japan was fundamentally decimated from the war. And General MacArthur was there with the occupation forces. And General MacArthur really enjoyed baseball. And when he was watching baseball in Japan, he said, the baseball here, they need to be more aggressive. They need to learn more American style baseball. And MacArthur happened to know Lefty O'Doul. When Lefty brought Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig to Japan before the war. And so General MacArthur called up Lefty O'Doul, and Lefty O'Doul said, well, we shouldn't take a blonde-haired American to Japan just yet. And this was in the early 50s. So Lefty O'Doul told MacArthur, have this Japanese American ball player. What if he goes to Japan and plays ball there? And they thought it was a great thing. And so my father went to Japan in 1951 and joined the Tokyo Giants. And it's interesting. And my hat's off to my father. So he goes to Japan in 1951. This is, a little over 5 years after the war. His teammates, many of them lost their close friends, family members to the war. When he would go to cities like Hiroshima to play baseball, a lot of the fans weren't very fond of Americans yet. And so, again, in turn, there was a lot of prejudice and bias against him. There were many fans and teammates that weren't too fond of him. But my father, having talked to Lefty O'Doul, he didn't meet with General MacArthur, but he felt like he was a representative of the United States and that he had to set a good example. But all through that, he brought a lot of aggressive play. He brought the hard slide, like you see here on, on this screen. He brought the drag bunt. He did the home steal, which, by the way, at 11 home steals, he still holds the record in Japanese baseball to this day. And initially, a lot of the fans did not like that aggressive style of play. But in his first year, he hit 357, which is a great batting average. And the fans started to really rally behind him. My father also tried very hard to always assimilate. Although the Tokyo Giants organization would allow him to fly first class or to ride on first class on the trains, he always opted to be with the rest of the players. He wanted to set the right example. And slowly but surely, he won over the teammates, won over fans. But I can only imagine, the type of, difficulty and the prejudice that he went through, even through this experience. Through all of this, I like to talk about my father, but I always have to talk about my mother as well, because my mother was 21 years old when she moved to Japan with my father. And my father traveling all around Japan, she was at home by herself many times, and that takes a lot of courage as well. There's clearly a great woman behind every great man. And I'm still trying to get great, but my wife is great. And, I appreciate what women do for what men are often doing on a lot of these adventures. So my father played for the Tokyo Giants. He did extremely well. He was in uniform for 38 years. He was with 6 different baseball teams in Japan. To this day, he is regarded as one of the best 9 ball players of the Tokyo Giants. He's also a Hall of Fame inductee. This is a trophy case that we put up in the Daniel K. Inoue International Airport in Honolulu. And it's right by the Japan Airlines gate. But if any of you ever have a chance to visit the airport, I hope you can, take a look at this. But this trophy case really put together and really illustrates his achievements in Japan. Our family were extremely proud of what he accomplished on the diamond, but more so off the diamond. To go through tough times on both sides of the ocean, and but playing sports, allowing fans to enjoy his art, his talent, and hopefully in his own way of trying to bridge both countries together. I know that was very important for him. When I think about my father today, I always think about what I call the 3 Ks. And I learned this from one of my early mentors that I had when I first started working. The 3 Ks stand for kansha, which means gratitude. And my father was always grateful to people who helped him, joining the teams, moving from country to country. The second K is kenkyo, which means humility, being humble. And he definitely had that. He was not a braggart by any means. And the third is konjo, courage. And I always call this 3 Ks. And he really lived those 3 Ks. And to this day, I'm extremely proud of him for that. I think he learned a lot of that from his father, who traveled when he was 16 to Hawaii, but also probably got a lot from a lot of the Nisei veterans as well during his stint at the Army. But I think a lot of these great values are with the Issei, the Japanese who came from Japan to Hawaii, with this dream, with these aspirations, of leading a good life. So let me talk a little bit about myself now, and that's me right there. I'm swinging a sword thinking it's a bat. But, so I'm born and raised in Tokyo because my parents were there. And my 2 sisters are there, and behind me are my grandparents, my mother to my right. And I wanted to be a baseball player very badly. And I played ball right through high school. I ended up in college playing baseball for the University of San Francisco. But unfortunately, I just wasn't good enough in baseball. It was a sad day for me when I finally gave it up. Felt like I brought a lot of shame to the family because there were a lot of people who had high expectations for me to play baseball. Um, and it was a tough time for me when I quit. But similar to how my father carried on with all of his affairs, you never give up, and you got one life to live. You got to make the best of it. You have to have courage, and so I dug into my academics and studying. I graduated in a degree in business and accounting, and then in 1979 I joined this firm called KPMG. Used to be called Pete Marwick back then in Los Angeles. And my boss told me, "Oh, you speak Japanese. You should take care of Japanese companies that are coming into Southern California." And back then, every day there was there was at least a couple Japanese companies setting up businesses in Los Angeles. It was just really a hot market back then. And so I was very fortunate that it was a perfect timing. I had a good background in accounting. I was bilingual. And needless to say, my father's name helped me out a lot as well. It opened a lot of doors. And I did very well in the profession. A lot of accounting work, auditing work, a lot of tax work. But then this photo was a turning point for me. This is in the middle is Tommy Lasorda. This is when Hideo Nomo, again, another Japanese who who went off to a big adventure to play for the Major League Baseball leagues. And this was a celebratory event where they opened up a Yoshinoya Beef Bowl restaurant in Dodger Stadium. And the person to Tommy Lasorda's right is Mr. Abe, who was the president of Yoshinoya. And I was their accountant, their auditor from KPMG, and he invited me for this special event. And shortly after this this game, Mr. Abe asked me to help them put in a new information technology system. And I remember to this day looking at Mr. Abe and said, "I don't know anything about IT systems." And he said, "Mr. Yonamine, we trust you. You could speak our language. Go get the specialists and, put a team together and help us out." And that's exactly what I did. And lo and behold, I was very fortunate. There were a lot of sleepless nights, but we put in a great system for them. And that's when I went from accounting more into the information technology arena. And then from there, if maybe some of you recall, we had this thing called Y2K. The year 2000, all computer systems were supposed to stop, which they never did. But we were provided with many opportunities to implement very expensive, huge investment IT systems, and for Japanese companies from the East Coast to the West Coast. So as I was doing that, I started to visit Japan more often. And it dawned on me that in order for me to really be of service to my Japanese customers, that I should be in Japan. And not that I got a clue from my father or my grandfather. I decided to relocate myself, my family, my 3 children, my wife. We moved to Japan, and this was in the late 90s, right before year 2000. And I set up a company called KPMG Consulting. It was a zero start. And I still remember to this day, I'm looking at IBM in Japan, or I'm looking at Accenture in Japan, thinking, how am I going to compete with any of them? There was tremendous stress and pressure because we were a zero start business. And, the parent company at KPMG, it wasn't as if they were giving me lots of money to do this venture. And naturally, I had the brand recognition. Everyone knew who my father was. So that was a lot of internal pressure for me to succeed. And then also having 3 children, as any parent, you got to make a living. So those were tough times for me, but very fortunately, hard work, persistence paid off. We started building a great business. went as high as 3,500 people, not just in Japan, but in the Asia Pacific area. Um, and so I did that for a number of years. But then in 2004, I decided to take a break from the consulting, the IT arena, came back to Hawaii. And as Deidre mentioned, I worked for the city and county of Honolulu for a year and a half. I worked under Mayor Mufi Hanneman, who is running again for mayor, especially right now during this COVID-19 time. It's a very trying time, and we got to make sure we get the right leaders in elected office. But I had the pleasure of working for him for a year and a half, and I was very impressed with him. Did that, helped him transform the city, use a lot of my consulting skills, and I think we implemented a lot of best practices for the city and county of Honolulu. But then one of my old clients, Hitachi, asked me to go back to Japan in 2006. And this was shortly after I negotiated the Hitachi tree for Hitachi at Moanalua Gardens right here in Honolulu. A lot of people in Japan know the Nannoki, it's the Hitachi tree. And after negotiating that for Hitachi, they offered me to join their company and set up a consulting business for them. I signed a 4-year contract. Then I moved to Japan, but just as I moved to Japan and I started Hitachi Consulting, one thing that I experienced that really reminds me about what we're going through today is the SARS outbreak. So there was the SARS outbreak out of China. And those were very dire times as well. We were very concerned about SARS really infecting a lot of people in Japan as well. And at the time, I had a lot of business in China as well. So I'll touch on that a little bit later. But the only difference from the SARS outbreak to what we're going through at COVID-19 today is at the time, China was not very global. People were not traveling to all different parts of the world. And so SARS was somewhat contained within China. And that was one of the biggest differences between SARS and COVID-19. COVID-19, as you know, a lot of Chinese traveled quite a bit. And that had quite a bit to do with the spread of the virus. So I spent 4 years with Hitachi, and they were great years. Hitachi is an excellent organization. They're making a train here in Honolulu, and we're really looking forward to that. But after my 4-year contract, I was getting ready to return to Hawaii, but then I got an offer to join IBM. And so I joined IBM, and a couple of years after that, many of you may recall, we had the Tohoku earthquake. And that was another real crisis in Japan. And I still remember being in charge of 23,000 employees for IBM Japan. And with the earthquake, with the radiation scares that we had in Japan, a lot of my relatives asking me to come home immediately, to leave Japan. I couldn't, Japan was home for me as well. And, a lot of my employees needed to see me just walk in the hallways. I mean, we didn't get a lot of business done back in those days, but it was important to let all of the employees and their families know that the president and, country general manager wasn't going to leave them. And, but very fortunately, there wasn't much of a radiation problem in Tokyo after all. A lot of concerns with the people who were displaced from homes and the ongoing radiation, especially in the Fukushima area. But we got through that, and that's something I'll touch on later with COVID-19 is sometimes you just think things are so bad and dire that they never end, but they do. Life goes on and people are very resilient. We get back on our feet and keep going. But I had some very good years at IBM, and I finished my tour of duty there in 2017. And then I joined this company called GCA, spent time in Japan, also in the Bay Area. But then about roughly a year and a half ago, in 2017, I was invited, 2018, excuse me, I was invited to join Central Pacific Bank. And, this was, all I could say is that I was extremely fortunate, and sometimes I think it was fate as well. Central Pacific Bank, that I am currently the executive chairman of, was created 65 years ago. And it was created 65 years ago by Nisei war veterans, led by Senator Daniel Inouye, that you see on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. When all of the veterans came back to Hawaii, they found out that they couldn't get loans to buy a house. They couldn't get loans to start up a business. And so the veterans got together and they said, gee, we got to start our own bank. We need a bank that's going to help the Japanese American community. And but the only problem was that nobody knew banking. And so, but fortunately, one of the veterans had a good contact at Sumitomo Bank, reached out to Sumitomo, and Sumitomo immediately sent out one of their seasoned executives. And together, they created Central Pacific Bank. And at the time, Central Pacific Bank naturally started off to help the Japanese American community. But Senator Inouye said it can't be just a Japanese American community. We have to be a bank for all people who need help, in the state of Hawaii. So they became a bank for the entire community. Today, it's interesting. I recently became a board member of SMBC, which is the Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation. It is one of the largest financial institutions in the world. It was, entirely coincidental, but I'm very happy about serving on their board because we have that connection as well with Central Pacific Bank, and all the executives at SMBC are very pleased about that as well. Today, Central Pacific Bank, we have 1,000 employees. We're 6.5 billion in total assets. We have 35 branches, and we're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So again, from very humble beginnings, but from a core group of Nisei war veterans who started this bank, it's a tremendous legacy, and it's a tremendous responsibility. And I feel extremely honored to be the CEO of this organization. Today, Central Pacific Bank, and let me speak a little bit about the bank before COVID-19. We were already seeing a lot more competition. Today everything is about digital banking, and there was a lot of competition occurring. Mainland financial institutions coming into the Hawaii mortgages business. A lot of fintech, finance technology companies trying to take our market share. And yet, myself and our 1,000 employees, we carry a very important legacy. And we had to invest to make sure that this financial institution remains relevant and remains able to help the community. And so roughly about a year ago, we launched this program called RISE 2020. It was a $40 million investment. And that's a lot of money for our bank, a $40 million investment to redo our infrastructure, starting with our main building, rebranding of our business, and also placing in a brand new digital architecture, digital platform for the bank. The work is still in process. We are on schedule by January of next year on the corner of King Street and Alakea. And again, for all the people joining from Japan, I hope you can come to Honolulu next year and see our new renovated main building on the corner of King and Alakea. We will have a rebranding in place and a new digital platform as well. And we had to do this because we have to make sure that we can protect our franchise, that we remain relevant, and we can withstand all kinds of competition. Okay. Then something happened. As we went into February and March of this year, COVID-19 strikes. And on March 26th, the governor calls a quarantine for the state of Hawaii. Tourism entirely shuts down. And tourism, the Hawaii economy is held by defense and tourism. Our tourism industry is $17 billion. And it's almost like a faucet, a water faucet. It was just turned off. Um, from our bank's position, looking at our tens of thousands of customers, we see the hurt. Customers are struggling today. And unfortunately, with tourism still shut down, as we go into the fall and winter months, unfortunately, this pain will continue. We can only hope that we figure out effective ways to restart tourism and we find the right balance and medium where we can coexist with COVID-19. It's going to be critical because although Hawaii has been very successful in containing COVID-19 with infections less than 750, with deaths, unfortunately, but under 20, year to date, Hawaii has done a great job in containing COVID-19, but unfortunately, we have 150,000 people who are unemployed today. Our unemployment rate is roughly 23%, and yet we still don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So given these circumstances, given our legacy, given of what I have learned, what our employees have inherited from the founders of Central Pacific Bank, we stepped up. We had to. We had no other choice. And as we look forward, we knew that tourism had stopped. So how can we help our customers? How can we help our community? And we first looked at the Trump administration CARES Act, where they had the Paycheck Protection Program. This was a loan program designed to help small businesses, which most Hawaii companies are. Our people worked tirelessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We processed close to 7,500 applications and brought in close to $700 million of loan amounts into Hawaii. And the feature of the Paycheck Protection Program is if companies use it for payroll and other categories, they can actually, the federal government would forgive the loan. So this would be a total value add. It would be very accretive to their company and also to the community. We knew with tourism shut down that our bank had to step up to bring in those PPP monies into the Hawaii community. And our employees really made us proud, And so that was one of the things we did. Second thing, we felt that we need to help the community. We launched a program called Keep Hawaii Cooking. And what we did is we subsidized all of their takeout and delivery meals. And, it was really a gesture on our part. There was nothing really strategic there per se. We just wanted to help the residents in Hawaii and help the restaurants. But what happened through the effort is that a lot of the residents started to use a lot of the restaurants again, because for a while there, nobody wanted to do anything or pick up any food from the restaurants. And I think through this program, it kind of reinvigorated the restaurant industry, and we're very happy to see that. To the upper left, you see Kizuna Aloha. This was a program that we started with roughly 40 Japanese companies here in Hawaii, along with a lot of state and other nonprofit participation. We started a communication campaign to Japan and telling them that we're very sorry that they can't come to Hawaii right now. You'll see on the bottom right-hand side how empty Waikiki is today. And we wanted to let them know that they can't come now, but we're thinking of them. And that when Hawaii is safe and healthy again, that we want them to come back right away. And I think they appreciated that messaging. We had the governor message. We sent them a lot of video content that they can enjoy as they're stuck in home during their stay-at-home mandates as well. I touched on travel bubbles. We're very active in lobbying the state of Hawaii and also helping the governor in trying to proceed with discussions and dialogue with the Japanese government and now also with the Korean government to try and open up these bubbles and corridors so we can start getting residents more comfortable with the reopening of tourism, and hopefully get more tourists back here as quickly as possible. We have also done, other work for the community. We helped the Wahiawa General Hospital with their new COVID-19 facilities so they can have more ICU space in the event that there's a spread of the virus. We wrote to Governor Tamaki in Okinawa, and he was very nice. The government of Okinawa sent personal protection equipment to Hawaii, and we were very proud to be a part of that with the Hawaii United Okinawan Association, and we're able to provide PPE equipment for Hawaii. And then finally, we are trying to facilitate Fujifilm Pharmaceuticals clinical trials on their antiviral Avigan drug with Queens Medical Health Center. And so, it's not just our bank, it's all of the other banks, many other companies here in Hawaii, some of the beauty, of the state of Hawaii, where we all come together and we try to do the very best we can for the community. I'm no expert at a pandemic, and I don't think anybody is. I have experienced tough times through the Tohoku earthquake and through the SARS virus as well. And, we're still trying to figure out, what the new normal is going to be through COVID-19. I don't think anybody has the perfect answer. But we have no other option where we have to figure out a way, as I mentioned earlier, on how we coexist with COVID-19. If we don't do that, a bad, ailing economy will present a lot of mental health issues, stress-related issues, more crime, unfortunately. We have to figure out what that proper balance is going to be. And, to do that, it takes courage, not just at my level. And it's not just courage or leadership at my level. It's courage and leadership at every level. And if we all do that, I'm sure and I'm confident that we'll figure out, what that right balance is and where to go going forward. This is the kind of time that all of us, have to think maybe, like we're 16 years old, jumping on a ship and going across the ocean to some new location, with a dream and with an aspiration to have a better life. And so with that, I'm gonna pause there, Deidre. I'm finished with my presentation, and I'm happy to take on any questions. Thank you very much for listening to my story.
Wow, well, thank you so much. That was a very personal and very inspirational story indeed. And we love it. We have a lot of questions that came in. I'm going to try to put them into a couple different categories. But when you were talking about your father and the 3 Ks, the kansha, kenkyo, and konjo, the courage and humility, how are these pertinent to all of us during this time of COVID? I think you touched upon it a little bit in your last remarks there, but how can we really take these Nisei values and implement them into our life as we're going forward?
Thank you. It's so easy to look to the bad, in life sometimes. And, sometimes with COVID-19, we're wearing masks, we have to social distance, we go to our favorite restaurant only to know that only, there's 50% capacity. We could go on, but at the end of the day, sometimes we have to stop and pause and be grateful that we're still around, that we're healthy, that our family is healthy, that we have, a business that we could go to. And I think it's important for us to reflect back on that gratitude sometimes. I think there's always a good and bad in every situation in life. And sometimes we have to look for the good, and be grateful about that. In terms of you know kenkyo, and being humble, I am humbled by COVID-19. I mean, just when you could be the CEO of a great financial institution, I could be president of IBM Japan. But once again, a reminder of how powerless you can be, in this universe, in this world, and it's important for us to feel and understand that, with humility and being humble, you learn more, you grow more, and you listen to people. Nobody is an expert on the new normal. But by being humble, you open up yourself to a lot of good advice. And finally, on konjo, courage. You have to have courage. This is not an easy time, and this is the kind of moment where we all have to squeeze out our own version of courage. Try and participate in life that way. Be a role model, and you can help a lot of people. You can inspire a lot of people. And I get inspired every day as well. So I hope that was a good response for your question there.
Definitely. Well, and speaking of inspiration, someone wrote in and said, what was your message to your team at the start of the pandemic, and what were the key motivators that pushed your team of leaders? I mean, you talked about how you were, around the clock and just, getting the PPP money out there, but was there a specific message that you shared?
I probably did, but I have to admit that I'm so proud of my team. They really stepped up. It wasn't rocket science already. I still remember our executive team come into a room saying, there's going to be a lot of hurt here. Our customers are going to hurt, our community's going to hurt, and we got to step it up. And it was very clear to us that the PPP, how can we leverage our foundation, our bank, to help residents in need for food, for something to get their minds off of COVID-19 and lighten up their day, have a good day. How do we help our businesses? And the answers all came. It was a real team effort, But I think what was, and I'm really happy about my executive team in particular right now, and then naturally all the other employees. They just really stepped up. It was almost automatic, and again, it's not just our financial organization, but it's many businesses, many nonprofits, a lot of people here in the state of Hawaii who stepped up, and it just reconfirmed that I made the right decision to come back to Hawaii and make this my home. Yeah.
Oh, I think we're all glad that you did. We have a lot of questions regarding the travel bubble idea that you are working on, and one of the questions is, there seem to be a lot of campaigns, I think, especially in Japan and Australia right now, where the governments are encouraging people to staycation, basically.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work with the travel bubble? Can you do both? I think before you said, both can be true. You can do both. Can you talk a little bit more about the travel bubble and how you see that positively happening here in Hawaii?
So, the early on, there was a lot of discussion about travel bubbles out in the Asia Pacific region, in particular between Australia and New Zealand, because their infection rates were so low. So, learning from that, it was almost, almost common sense that we should be looking at other low infection regions and create a corridor, between Hawaii and those regions. Hawaii, I mentioned, under 750 infections, which comes out to about 500 per million, give or take. Japan is still at 130 per million. So from an infection rate perspective, it makes the Japanese region very attractive, Korea attractive, most countries in Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand. So it's with that, given that we weren't reopening tourism, that myself and a fellow board member and a good friend of mine called Dwayne Carisu, the two of us went and pitched this at the Senate Special Committee for COVID-19, as well as the state administration. Now, I think where we are today is that the state is quite positive towards it. I'm happy to say that in collaboration with the Hawaii Tourism Authority, Hawaii Tourism Japan, also with the Japan-Hawaii Travel Association, we have crafted communication for the governor to the government of Japan, asking for a travel bubble, a travel corridor between our countries. And I shouldn't say countries, a state and a country. And some of the challenges we have, on the flip side with the U.S. mainland, where we still have very high infection rates, we need to look at testing opportunities. So the lieutenant governor have been talking about having tourists tested before they come to Hawaii, and that is a very viable option. The challenges we have on testing, whether it be from the mainland or in Japan, is the lack of supply of test kits today. There just aren't enough to go around, and less alone to provide that type of supply for people who are trying to go on vacation to Hawaii. That's not going to be deemed as a very high priority. But having said that, I think that's the only option for us with the mainland, where there's still higher infection rates. As to Asia, there are other options aside from testing. Given the low infection rates, for example, if Japan regarded Hawaii as what they call a level 1 COVID-19 region, the United States is level 3 because of the high infection rates. But if they could carve out Hawaii and make Hawaii a level 1, there wouldn't be any testing or quarantine requirements between the two regions, between Hawaii and Japan. That would be the optimal option, okay? But the Japanese government's not quite there yet either, right? So we had a lot of work to do in Hawaii to still work with the Department of Health, work with a lot of residents in Hawaii who are still afraid of having any visitors come to Hawaii. And then at the same time in Japan, we need the Japanese government to take a different perspective to the state of Hawaii, right? So there's work on both ends. But, Deidre, we have no option, right? We have 150,000 unemployed workers today. We're taking a huge hit economically, and we don't want to go down the path of looking at the consequences of an ailing economy. That there is a lot of hard work left, but we have no option but to challenge it, and we will. And we have some of the best people here in Hawaii, and we're contacting, some very good people in Japan to try and accelerate this. But we still have a lot of work ahead, right?
I think that brings up the question, the age-old discussion of diversifying Hawaii's economy. And, through COVID, we've seen, even Zoom, has taken off more than it had been. Is tech our diversification? Can we start looking at a tech sector that could be built up to be a real viable economic power hitter here?
So, first and foremost, it's still tourism. Okay, and we can, the Hawaii economy is based on tourism and defense. There's a lot of opportunity to double down on defense. I think the U.S. military would be very positive to make more investments in Hawaii, and they could be technology based, especially around cybersecurity. I think the NSA, the CIA, the FBI would be very open to looking at new opportunities in the state of Hawaii to make investments in that area. And that would be a good tech-based approach. But it's still tourism on the other flip side of the coin. Tourism is our low-hanging fruit. Trying to diversify now from tourism is very difficult and very dangerous as well. I think, we all need to be very focused on restarting our tourism industry. And as that starts to pick up and we get more headcount, we should next look at how to diversify tourism. So it's not just sand, sea, and surf, but we go into health tourism, athletics tourism, cultural tourism, technology tourism. Hawaii is a great place, I think, for technology tourism. We've been working on projects in the Kakaako area here in Honolulu, trying to get a lot more Japanese companies to work side by side with local companies here using Silicon Valley cloud-based technologies and creating a test and learn facility here in Hawaii. And we were really picking up a lot of momentum when COVID struck, and it kind of stopped things. But I'm still very bullish about that. I think a lot of people from Japan, Korea, other parts of Asia will find Hawaii is a great place. You're just, internet away from Silicon Valley technologies. And if there's one thing we learned through COVID-19 is a lot of people from Silicon Valley can now work remotely. And we hope that, some really sharp people come and work here in Hawaii. And through that interaction, we can look forward to what happens, going forward. But again, Deidre, I think this is not a time to radically diversify our economy. We have to bring tourism back to Hawaii first.
We're running out of time, but I wanted to end with this question from one of our high school students who helps us out here at the center on occasion. They wrote one sentence: "Are we going to be okay?" You want to address that? He's a junior in high school and just wants to know, is it going to be okay?
Right. So, first and foremost, like I said earlier, there's always good and the bad in every situation, and this is a moment where you really have to look for the good, go back to the feeling of being grateful, think of your blessings there, I'm healthy, I can still be athletic, I can enjoy good food. I mean, sometimes it goes to the basic things. And for a lot of our young people, I mean, this is a traumatic experience, I'm sure. Think of the good, be grateful first. And then, you have to keep the faith. Of course, we're going to be good again. Why do I know that? I don't have any scientific reason. It's a gut feel. I've gone through crises before. Human beings are very resilient. And I'm sure that we will get through this virus, and and we'll all together figure out what that new normal is. And the new normal is going to be great. I think there'll be a lot of technology. And hopefully we'll be very grateful when we get over this thing, right? So good times ahead. So don't worry about it. It'll be okay.
Okay, good. Well, I think that makes all of us on this call feel a little bit better, regardless of whether we are in high school or sitting at our desks at work right now. But I want to thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us, just sharing the personal stories and your insight and inspiration. We really appreciate it. And we also want to thank all of you out there who have spent your afternoon with us. We love having you with us, even though we can't necessarily see you. We encourage you to check out our various social media platforms, including our website, which is currently experiencing a little bit of maintenance, but it will be back up soon. We would love for you to sign up for our newsletter so you know what else we are doing in the future. In July, we are actually kicking off a new series called An Afternoon with the Author, where we invite a different author every month to come on and talk about the journey behind their book. We are kicking it off with the eloquent and lovely Julie Checkaway, who wrote the book, The 3-Year Swim Club, all about Coach Soichi Sakamoto and the students that he trained to swim in the ditches of the Maui sugar plantations, and they ended up going to the Olympics, a very, very inspiring story. And our next Take series will be with Reverend David Turner. He's with Church of the Crossroads. He's going to be talking about hope and faith in this time of pandemic and protest. If you are thinking, oh, that name Turner, it really rings a bell, you would be correct. He is the grandson of Colonel Ferrant Turner, the original commanding officer of the 100th Infantry Battalion Separate. So again, another legacy story there, and he is also a really engaging speaker. So we hope you join us for those two events. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Yonamine. We give you another virtual round of applause. And to everybody out there, until we meet again, stay well, be safe, and ahui ho. Aloha.
Thank you.